Welcome to the world of saints and scroungers. Saints and Scroungers is about busting the benefit thieves who steal millions every year from you and me, the taxpayer. Thankfully, all over the country, crack fraud investigators are pulling out all the stops to track down cheats and put an end to their scams. And coming up on today's programme, we're going to show you how one old lady got busted for a housing benefit scam that lasted for more than 20 years.
It's just not the behaviour you expect from 81-year-olds.
And in Wales, investigators knocked down a fraud run by a karate-kicking scrounger.
The clear message the department sends out is that if you commit benefit fraud, then we will find you and we will punish you.
From the scroungers ripping off the system to the saints who deserve every penny, we meet Jim Swift, who was desperate for help when his wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
The biggest fear was that I wouldn't be able to afford to pay the bills if I couldn't manage to care for my wife at home.
But first today, the story of one old lady and her 20-year scam. Retirement. After more than 4 decades of hard graft, it's time to start enjoying your golden years. Relax, put your feet up, take it easy, enjoy the finer things in life. Thank you. What if that wasn't enough? What if you wanted more? How far would you go to get it? Meet 81-year-old Ellen Lynch. Now, she may look like a sweet old lady, but don't be fooled. She spent more than 2 decades lying to different councils while claiming £70,000 in benefits. She's been living out her golden years in a £700,000 property in Tunbridge Wells, while you and me pay for her 2-bed weekend pad in central London. Fraud officers believe that despite the innocent facade, Lynch is a calculating fraudster.
She sounded like you expect an 81-year-old to sound, a nice elderly lady. Maybe I should be looking at elderly people in a different light from now on.
It's July 2007, and 81-year-old Lynch is out for a walk near her Lambeth flat. She's recognised in the community, but rarely given a second glance.
I seen her walking along the street. She looks really lonely, you know, when she's coming back from shopping and that, you know, but that's how she's always looked, you know. So, she just look a ordinary, oldish lady, you know.
An ordinary lady who could be missing out on government cash. Lynch has been claiming housing benefit and council tax benefit on her Lambeth flat since 1984. But for some reason, she wasn't receiving her state pension, something that most people of retirement age are entitled to.
It is unusual for somebody of Ellen Lynch's age not to have a pension. And one of the things that we would want to make sure is that she was getting all the money and help that she was entitled to.
So the council, believing they were going to help a sweet old lady in need, paid Ellen Lynch a visit.
Initially, we went along that this was an elderly lady and a mistake had been made on her claim.
In order to get her signed up for state pension, they simply needed to get some identification.
To verify that all this, we'd be looking for things like birth certificates, marriage certificates, passports, that type of thing.
Lynch doesn't have any ID in the house and claims not to know where she was born, brought up, or even whether she has brothers or sisters. I ask you.
The investigator certainly had the impression that this wasn't an innocent, confused elderly lady. She answered the questions, knew why the questions were being asked, just didn't answer very truthfully. I don't think the investigator totally believed her.
The suspicious answers are like a red rag to a bull for the Lambeth fraud team, and they decide to dig deeper. Entering Mrs Lynch's details into the land registry throws out a surprising result.
There was an Ellen Lynch of a similar date of birth claiming benefits in Tunbridge Wells.
Tunbridge Wells, the epitome of Middle England, the place regularly voted one of the best places in the country to live? What could a lady living in social housing in Lambeth have to do with Tunbridge Wells? Kathy contacts Richard Powell, her benefits team counterpart in the area, to make sure that Lambeth's Ellen Lynch is the same person.
We were able to advise Lambeth that we were certainly dealing with the same individual, and that was based on the physical description of the lady and also on confirmation of her signature on various documents that had been exchanged between the two authorities.
And that isn't the last surprising bit of news.
The Ellen Lynch in Tunbridge Wells was claiming council tax benefit for a 4-bedroom property in the area.
That's council tax benefit, currently worth over £1,600 a year, on a £700,000 house. Richard and his team really are disgusted, and with good reason.
We as officers had a clear suspicion that we were dealing with the same Ellen Lynch in both circumstances, claiming a housing benefit in London and council tax benefit on a separate property, not declared one to the other here in Tunbridge Wells.
So the picture is finally clear. Ellen Lynch spends most of the week in her £700,000 house here in Tunbridge Wells. But when she fancies a trip into town, she jumps on the train and goes to stay at her London flat. Her scam is the fact that she's not told either Lambeth or Tunbridge Wells Council about the other property and is fraudulently claiming benefits on both, totalling nearly 70 grand.
It's just not the behaviour you expect from 81-year-olds.
Later in the show, we find out what happens when investigators bring Ellen Lynch in for questioning.
If you look at the first part, it says, I declare that the information given by me on this form is correct. It wasn't, was it?
Next, it's goodbye to the benefit scroungers and hello to the people who actually deserve government help. Some people don't claim because they don't know they're entitled to something. But there are those out there whose mission is to shine a light on the cash that's available for those genuinely in need. And we call them the Saints. A blissful marriage, 2 wonderful daughters, 30 years in the job he loved. Jim Swift was really looking forward to his retirement. But life had other plans. Jim and Jan Swift lived together at home in Bolton. But in 2002, Jan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, an event that within just a few years would leave Jim at rock bottom. And I've come to meet Jim to find out more. How did you two meet?
We met at the first school that I started teaching at. Jan was already there. It took me a couple of months to get to know her, and then we started going out. Our first date, we travelled some 242 miles.
Wow.
Not bad for a first date.
Where did you go?
Went to Trentham Gardens, Alton Towers, and on the way home, Jan said, I wouldn't mind having fish and chips on the seafront at Blackpool. So, first date, that's where we went.
Jim knew immediately Jan was the woman he'd spend the rest of his life with.
It was more or less love at first sight. We just clicked, and so I never asked Jan actually to marry me. I just took her for an engagement ring one day, and that was it. Because she knew and I knew that we were right for one another.
The couple were married in the summer of 1969 and settled into a happy life living and working together.
She was fantastic. Very outgoing, very funny, certainly well organised, and a great teacher. She was the best infant and nursery teacher I ever met.
The pair had 2 daughters, Helen and Claire. Things couldn't be better.
Until Jan became ill 6 years ago, we had an idyllic life. The children were grown up in worthwhile jobs. Jan and I were in worthwhile jobs. We had a house in a lovely area. We had a nice car. Things were pretty rosy.
But Jan and Jim weren't going to have the happy retirement they dreamt of.
Things were great. We're heading towards retirement, looking forward to that. And in 1996, we went on a holiday to Italy.
Right.
It was on the holiday in Italy that I first noticed that something was wrong. We had a fantastic day in Venice. The following evening, we went out for a meal, and Jan suddenly said, "Where did we go yesterday?" And that sounds silly, but even in those early stages, I knew there was something wrong because it was the utter fear in her eyes. She really couldn't remember this fantastic day that we'd had. But we got back to England, things seemed pretty much the same, and so I put it to the back of my mind.
But over the next couple of years, Jan gradually became more and more forgetful.
Jan would have stopped paying bills. I would open the cupboards and find 12 tins of tuna, because obviously Jan couldn't remember whether we needed any tuna and kept on buying it. So there are indicators like that which led me to go to the doctor, and he referred me to a psychiatrist.
The psychiatrist sent Jan for a scan, suspecting nothing more than depression. Even at this early stage, Jim was doing his utmost to protect Jan.
I had been keeping things from Jan about the odd behaviour, but when the brain scan came back and I was told she had a perfectly normal brain, I told Jan what had been going on. Her reply was that she was glad that I hadn't told her because she wouldn't have wanted to know the worst.
But by 2002, it was clear to Jim that he could no longer ignore the symptoms.
Things didn't get any better, and so she was sent for a further brain scan in Manchester, and the results of that showed that she did in fact have Alzheimer's. And because she had indicated that she didn't want to know the worst, then since that time I haven't told her, so to this day she's not aware that she has dementia. That's your family, isn't it? Your sister?
Yes, I don't know.
Deborah?
Oh, Deborah. Oh,
Mum
yes,
and Dad?
of course it was, yes. Yes, that was that.
Today, even some of the most significant moments of their lives have disappeared from her memory.
What's that? What's this one?
You wouldn't tell it.
It's you and I on our wedding day. I was given the diagnosis over the telephone. I was at school, and I was actually sent home because even though I was expecting the worst, it still comes as a shock to have it verified. And so I came home, and I remember sitting outside with Jan in the sunshine, thinking of what this was going to mean for the future. Over the years, things disappeared, such as being able to write her own name, being able to deal with money. She is no longer aware of where the toilet is. She will ask, where is the toilet? Where's the bedroom? Which means, really, that although she spent a lot of her teaching career teaching nursery and infant children, her mental capacity is now less than theirs. So this is
look at this.
Claire and her cups from Cleveland's.
Yes. Look at her.
And because Alzheimer's is a progressive condition with most sufferers dying within 10 years of diagnosis, it was important for Jim to make every moment count.
My mantra was the song that Eva Cassidy sings, Fields of Gold, where the line is, I swear in the days to come we will walk in fields of gold. So since the diagnosis, I have been determined to make Jan's last days as golden as possible. And to that end, we've been on cruises. We flew to America. Every day has been Christmas Day for Jan. Whatever she wanted, I've provided. And so Jan has really enjoyed the last 6 years, but we've had to cram everything into that short period.
But making things good for Jan had a financial cost. Jim had to retire early, leaving him with a seriously depleted pension. Andy spent nearly all of his savings caring for Jan, making adaptations to the house and making her life as good as possible.
Financially, things were starting to get a bit worrying. I was going through my savings, and I also didn't realise how I was being affected. Clean your teeth?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jim really wants to care for Jan at home, so he converted the garage into a downstairs bedroom with walk-in shower.
Which way? This?
But as she got worse, Jim was terrified he'd made the wrong decision.
The biggest fear was that I wouldn't be able to afford to pay the bills if I couldn't manage to care for my wife at home.
Sit down.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Having coped for years on his own, Jim was emotionally and financially drained. He was determined never to abandon Jan, but his biggest fear was that he wouldn't have the means to fulfill his promise. Coming up, Jim finds the nursing angel who makes all the difference in the world.
Without her expertise, professionalism, care and compassion, I don't think I could have got this far. She has been there for my health as much as to help with Jan.
And from the saints who deserve help to the scroungers ripping off the system. Later, fraudster Ellen Lynch is grilled by investigators who've uncovered her double-crossing scam. But first, the case of a scrounger who was claiming benefits while she was actually getting hot and sweaty in a sports hall. Every year, our government pays out nearly £10 billion in disability living allowance that gives much-needed income to people who are sick and disabled. But there are some who abuse the system, and our next case is one such crook. Meet Deanna James, a single mum who lives in Caerphilly in Wales. Deanna is claiming disability living allowance for a back pain, but investigators suspect fraud when she's discovered kicking her way through a martial arts class.
There was information there that suggested her condition wasn't as bad as she suggested.
The task of bringing Deanna to justice fell to investigator Kevin McGrath. Kevin is one of more than 3,000 fraud investigators based all over the country. It's their mission to bust the benefit thieves. At their disposal are hundreds of computer systems bursting with data and the latest high-tech surveillance equipment to go undercover and record a fraudster's every move. From the good old-fashioned stakeout to using covert filming, they work around the clock to beat the cheats who steal millions from the taxpayer every year. It's the 16th of February 2006 and the Department for Work and Pensions takes a call to its fraud hotline from a member of the public. It states Deanna James is making a claim for assistance she should definitely not be getting.
Our National Benefit Fraud Hotline received an anonymous phone call at the start of 2006 and the allegation suggested that Deanna, although she was claiming disability living allowance, her condition wasn't as serious as suggested.
Back in 2003, Deanna was involved in a car accident and sustained a back injury. Her claim for disability living allowance states she is unable to walk more than 5 yards without help. The diagnosis is severe sciatica. Natasha Price is a physiotherapist and specialist in these sort of complaints.
In the early stages of sciatica, when someone has recently presented with it, they may well have limitations in the movement of their spine, constant pain in the legs, some numbness, some tingling. They generally don't have problems walking, but they would be a bit slower.
By 2006, Deanna had been getting disability living allowance worth over £50 a week for 3 years. But how long would sciatica be expected to last?
We would expect that the majority of people with sciatica, so that's over 80% of the people with sciatica, will settle down within 6 to 12 weeks to a point where they've got very little pain at all.
So 3 years could be an extremely long time to claim benefits for a back problem that usually improves after 3 months. The tip-off suggested that Deanna had got so much better, she'd taken up martial arts.
The allegation from the member of the public suggested that she was taking part in taekwondo activities several times a week.
Taekwondo? That's not the sort of sport I'd imagine someone with a back problem could compete in. Darren Johns is an expert in what is one of the world's most popular martial arts and runs a taekwondo school in Cardiff.
Up and back, okay? Front leg, yop, chagi.
Taekwondo in its entirety is basically a form of self-defense. It's a Korean form of self-defense.
Training includes blocks, kicks, punches, strikes and various takedowns or sweeps.
It certainly develops your fitness in every aspect, from flexibility to stamina to your awareness. Right from an early stage, the individual has to stretch, the individual has to train in order to improve the stamina.
Now, it may be thought that a little exercise could improve a condition like sciatica.
We absolutely positively encourage people with back pain and sciatica to do exercise. I have to say that taekwondo would not be top of my list, but for Deanna James to be able to do taekwondo, I find it absolutely impossible to believe that she couldn't walk more than 5 yards.
With just a tip-off to go on, Kevin and his team launched an investigation to take a closer look at Deanna. Their first line of inquiry is to do some initial digging on the internet.
Yes, the allegations suggested that Deanna was engaged in activities at the Taekwondo school in Oakdale. We did an initial search, which led us then to the taekwondowales.com website, which is for that specific school. The site actually gives a whole range of information concerning students, instructors, previous award ceremonies, photographs, a gallery.
And it's here that the investigators find the first crucial piece of evidence against Deanna.
This is a picture of Deanna engaged in training for her various belts.
Deanna James has claimed thousands of pounds in DLA, yet here she is photographed training in Taekwondo. And it seems that she also likes running. Continuing the investigation, Kevin enters her name into a search engine and comes across another damning piece of evidence. Deanna running a 5-kilometre charity fun run in Cardiff.
Deanna did the Race for Life at the beginning of June, yet halfway through June she then made a repeat claim to the department stating that her circumstances had changed significantly. The main changes being that she was now virtually unable to walk.
Yeah, I'll be like that after a 5K myself, but you can't claim DLA for it.
All the pictorial evidence certainly suggested that her condition wasn't as bad as it seemed.
Kevin goes straight to the scene of the crime and visits the Taekwondo school Deanna's been training at.
Yeah, this is the Oakdale Community Centre, and we came here to establish that this was the location where the Taekwondo school was running from. We were able to see the rooms where the Taekwondo class met, and we were also able to take a witness statement which confirmed the level of activity that Deanna undertook. We were able to establish that she had received awards for her green belt.
No beginner then.
In relation to green belt, you're there or thereabouts halfway to black belt.
Halfway to black belt? That's not bad for someone who claims she's incapable of walking 5 yards. With the photographs and the witness statements confirming how fit and flexible Deanna James really is, Kevin has the evidence he needs to put this fraudster out of action. He immediately gets her benefits stopped and sets about getting the taxpayers' money back.
We sent Deanna a letter advising her of an appointment to come for an interview under caution, and she attended this job centre with her solicitor.
The interview starts with the investigator checking that Deanna knows what she wrote on her claim form.
We confirmed her understanding of the rules for claiming disability living allowance and the fact that she would have to report any changes of circumstance to us.
The investigator then presents Deanna with the evidence that she's been taking part in Taekwondo, but to their surprise, she refuses to accept that this might affect her entitlement to benefits.
But she felt that because the nature of her Taekwondo practicing was non-contact, that it didn't necessarily constitute a change she should report.
This is the woman with a green belt in Taekwondo who made a claim for even more benefit the same month as doing a 5K charity run.
She had failed to notify the department of a change in circumstances that she knew would affect her entitlement to benefit.
It's the 9th of July 2007 at Caerphilly County Court, and realising there's no way to contradict the damning evidence, Deanna James pleads guilty to benefit fraud. The judge sentences her to a 9-month supervised community order, meaning weekly meetings with a probation service, and orders her to repay disability living allowance totalling more than £2,000. For Kevin McGrath, it's vindication of his department's determination to bust the benefit cheats.
Fraud is fraud, no matter how much the amount is. The bottom line is, as our recent campaign has suggested, no ifs, no buts.
Benefit cheats who defraud the system aren't just affecting you and me, the taxpayers, they're also hurting the saints, the people that the money is there for in the first place. There are more than 400,000 people in the UK suffering from Alzheimer's disease, a progressive form of dementia that kills off brain cells gradually, and there's no cure. Jim Swift's wife Jan was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in 2002 at the age of just 58.
Over the years, things disappeared, such as being able to write her own name, being able to deal with money, which means really that although she spent a lot of her teaching career teaching nursery and infant children, her mental capacity is now less than theirs.
3 years on and Jim is nearing rock bottom. He's worn out physically and worried he can't afford to carry on looking after Jan at home.
The biggest fear was that I wouldn't be able to afford to pay the bills if I couldn't manage to care for my wife at home.
But his life is about to change for the better. Through his local hospital, he is put in contact with Paula Smith, an Admiral nurse. Admiral nurses are specialists who work with the carers of people with dementia, and Paula knows just how tough it can be caring for someone with Alzheimer's.
Jim was referred to our service in February 2005, and that's when I first started seeing him at home, looking at what sort of support we can offer him.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Jim.
Don't you come in?
Thanks very much. He was referred to our service because he was finding it more difficult coming to terms with Jan's diagnosis and the changes that he was seeing in her.
Without her expertise, professionalism, care and compassion, I don't think I could have got this far. She has been there for my health as much as to help with Jan.
So how have things been going, Jim, since I saw you?
Having finally found someone who fully understands what he is going through means Jim no longer has to cope on his own.
Providing 24-hour care for somebody who has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is really difficult because you literally do provide 24-hour care with no break. Jim is a very devoted husband. He wants to enhance Jan's quality of life. He's made a conscious decision that he wants to provide the care for Jan within their own home for as long as he's physically able.
Reluctant at first to admit that he just couldn't soldier on, Paula helps Jim to understand that his health is every bit as vital as Jan's.
It's important to support carers of people with Alzheimer's disease because the carer is the person that is best placed to provide the level of support that the person with the diagnosis needs. It's also really important because the carer has their own needs in their own right, that they may well need emotional support and also their physical health needs as well, since they've taken on such an enormous role as being carer.
That's your first one. One more coming up.
Oh.
Paula gives me a chance to sort of let off steam and to talk to someone about Jan's condition, to talk to someone who's actually visited patients with the same sort of behaviour, makes it easy to talk.
Conversation can be a great healer for a lot of things, can't it?
It can, yes. Sometimes the things that she does really frustrate you, and then the guilt kicks in and you sort of get annoyed, and then you're guilty because you know that your wife isn't doing it deliberately. For instance, she would go to the toilet and have reams of toilet paper in her pocket. She'll wander around with a cushion in her hand. She follows me everywhere. So it can be frustrating with the best will in the world.
But Paula has done more than just listen. She tells Jim that he could claim benefits that would help him look after Jan at home.
We looked at what benefits he was actually in receipt of at the time, and we then looked at what his entitlement was and what Jan's entitlement was at the time, and then consequently applied for those benefits.
And what sort of care and allowances did they actually advise you to try and get?
The carer's allowance for myself and the disability living allowance for Jan, which is comprised of two components, care and mobility.
Give me an idea of how much money that gives you a month and what that enables you to do.
Altogether, I probably get several £100 a month, and with that money I'm able to pay for carers to come in to look after Jan. I'm able to pay for her respite care.
Which in turn gives you a well-earned break.
Which, as you say, enables me to get out and do something for myself, I suppose. I know that it's often said that people don't take up benefits that they're entitled to for whatever reason. But if it gives you peace of mind, and also, probably more importantly, if it helps make the life of the person who is disabled that much better, then you should certainly find out what is available.
Thanks to Paula's support and the various benefits, Jim now gets a break 2 days a week when Jan goes to respite care. What exactly is respite?
Respite gives me a chance to recharge my batteries. I'm exhausted now most of the time. Originally I thought, because I was younger, that I'd be therefore stronger and more able to cope. But you aren't. This is a disease I think would wear down an Olympic athlete, because it's looking after two people now 24 hours a day. So respite gives me a chance to do something for myself.
Jim now has the chance to get away from things, if only for a short time. He loves nothing more than taking a stroll out into the hills near his home, something that without respite care he was unable to do.
Jan is the love of my life, but I do need, for my benefit and for Jan's, to come out here to get away from the situation, to enjoy the scenery, because I cannot do the job 24/7 and keep my sanity without a break. You can forget, albeit temporarily, the problems you have, and for a short while I'm at peace, I suppose you could say, away from the dreadful situation that my wife is in. When I first sent her into respite, I felt as if I'd betrayed her, abandoned her, because I was sending her into an environment where she could well be unhappy. But I do realise now it's vital for carers to have breaks.
How are things now, 6 years down the line?
Jan recently has entered what I think is probably the last phase. She's started to get aggressive. She tells me I'm stupid, nasty, horrible, which is difficult to take. But I realise that it's not the real Jan. I'm now living with somebody who used to be my wife, but is fast disappearing. This is a disease that strips away every vestige of humanity bit by bit.
Jim, lots of people have difficulty in their life. What would you say to them to do?
There are benefits out there. I feel that some of them should be increased. But in the first instance, you're really at a loss. You don't know who to turn to, who to speak to. Perhaps a Citizens Advice Bureau or the Admiral Nurse Service in the case of people with dementia. But they are there to help you, and you really will need that.
For the future, Jim, what's your hopes?
My hopes for the future, I've long ago given up hope that there will be a cure for Alzheimer's. So my intention is to keep Jan at home for as long as possible. In fact, right through her illness, if I'm strong enough to do so. To send Jan away, even if I visited her every day, would seem to me like abandoning her.
Jim, I know Jan's been taken care of today. This is your day of rest and recuperation. So I'm going to say thanks for your tea, and I'm going to love you and leave you.
Yeah,
take care. Cheers, Jim.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I am so pleased that Jim is now getting the help that he needs, which allows him to take care of his wife and ensures that he can take a well-earned break.
Jan means everything to me. If I can make Jan as happy as possible, then I will have done my job.
Since 1984, Ellen Lynch has been living in a housing association flat in Lambeth and claiming housing benefit and council tax on that property. At the same time, she's been claiming benefits on her 4-bedroomed house here in Tunbridge Wells. It's a double scam, ripping off 2 councils. Alex Wrigley runs a housing association scheme providing a vital service for the locals.
It can be very frustrating when dealing with abuses of social housing, not only for me as a social landlord trying to put the right people in the right properties, but especially for those people who are on the waiting list, who've perhaps been waiting for years and years for the right size property or the right type of property to become available. On this estate, we have 270 properties. Very rarely do they become free.
And with waiting times of up to a year, when they do become free, the competition is staggering.
75% of the people that we put into our properties come from Lambeth Council's waiting list. That waiting list stands in the thousands. It's certainly not intended